Good day. Welcome to another session of Fog Accountancy Tutorials. Today we are going to continue our series on cost segregation, and we are going to look at the high-low method with a step up in fixed cost. So we'll say high-low method with a step up in fixed cost. Now, remember that we said from our video on cost behavior that fixed cost can actually change or step up when it exceeds an activity range. Now, what we are going to do now is to look at a situation where the activity level was exceeded, the range was exceeded, and there was a step up in fixed cost. And therefore, if you are asked to use the high-low method to segregate the cost, it may be difficult because the two activity levels, which is the highest and the lowest, may not have the same fixed cost, in a sense that the highest activity level may have exceeded the range of the relevant range. And then we have to now find a way to find a variable cost per unit even in that situation. Now, what usually will happen is that, let us assume that we have an activity level of 3,000 units at a total cost of 17,000, and then we have an activity level of 5,000 units at a total cost of 27,500 Ghana cedis. Now, if these are our two activity levels that we are using, and the question told us that fixed cost will increase by 500 cedis when output exceeds 4,000 units. Now, fixed cost will increase by 500 cedis when output exceeds 4,000. Now, look here. The first output is 3,000 units. The second output is 5,000 units. And so, if we are told that fixed cost will increase by 500 units when output exceed 4,000, then it means that the highest activity level, which is the 5,000, already exceeds the 4,000 units. So inside the cost associated with this level is an increase or a step up of 500 cedis fixed cost. That is the meaning. And unless the fixed costs are the same for the two levels, we cannot find the variable cost per unit. I repeat, if you have two activity levels where the fixed cost of the highest level is different from the fixed cost in the lowest activity level level's total cost, then you cannot easily find your variable cost per unit. There is something that should be done, and that is what I'm going to teach you. And so inside here is a fixed cost. Inside the 27,500 is also a fixed cost. But the fixed cost inside the 27,500 is higher than that of the 17,000 because activity level at that point exceeds 4,000, which is a relevant range. And therefore, what we have to do now is that we know that the difference is definitely 500 cedis. And so what we have to do now is that we will either subtract 500 cedis from this for the purpose of calculating the variable cost per unit only. We are not adjusting it for everything that we are going to do. We are going to adjust this cost, total cost, by subtracting either the 500, we subtract it from here, so that we know that now we have taken out the fixed cost increase, or we can add the 500 to 17,000 here. At least our main objective is to find the variable cost per unit, and we need to make the fixed cost the same for the two activity levels for the purpose of calculating the variable cost per unit. And so what is going to happen is that, let us assume we are subtracting the 500 from the highest activity level. So when it happens, we have two options. We will go repeat. I repeat that it's either we are taking out the increase or we are adding to where there is no increase. And if we choose to go by the increase, taking out from the increase, then it means that for the purpose of getting your variable cost per unit, we know that it is the high cost minus the low over this minus that. And so instead of saying 27,500, we are taking out the increase of 500. And so we can say it's 27,000 minus 17,000 all over 5,000 units minus 3,000 units. And that is going to give us 10,000 cedis over 2,000 units, which eventually gives us 5 cedis per unit. And so that is going to be our variable cost per unit. So at every point in time, when there is an increase in the fixed cost because of an exceeding units produced, then what we do is that we can just reduce the fixed cost of the highest level by the difference, and then we would find the variable cost per unit. Afterwards, then we'll know how to find the total cost functions. So I'm going to pick a question for us to solve so that we'll get a better understanding of what I'm explaining. Okay, so let's solve this question together. A company has identified that total fixed cost increased by 15,000 Ghana cedis when activity level equals or exceeds 19,000 units. The variable cost per unit is constant over this range of activity. The company has identified the following cost at 2 activity levels. So we have the high and the low. So production is 22,000 for the high, and then the total cost is 195,000 Ghana cedis. And at the lower level, it's 17,000 units at 165,000 Ghana cedis. Now, you are required to use the high-low method to find the variable cost per unit and estimate the total cost that will be incurred in producing A, 25,000 units, and B, 14,000 units. All right, so this is the question we are going to look at. All right, so we are told that the highest activity level is 22,000 units and at a cost of 195,000, and the lowest activity level is 17,000 units at a cost of 165,000 cedis. Now, most importantly, we are told that fixed cost will increase by 15,000 cedis when output reaches or exceeds. So it is like equal to or greater than. When output reaches or exceeds 19,000. So it means that below here, output at the lower level, output was not up to 19,000. But the moment output got to 19,000, it jumped, total fixed cost jumped by 15,000. And so that means that inside the total cost of the 22,000 units, it's an increase, a step up in fixed cost of 15,000 Ghana cedis. So it means that the fixed cost component in the lower activity level is not the same as the fixed cost component in the higher activity level. There is a difference of 15,000. That came about because this activity level exceeded the 19,000 units. And therefore, there is a 15,000 here. And so in order to find your variable cost per unit, you would need to either add up the 15,000 to the lower level so that it will have the same fixed cost for the sake of finding your variable cost per unit, or you would subtract it from what you have at the top. So whichever way that we want to go by. So let us assume that this time we want to add the 15,000 to the lower level. And so we will say that to get your variable cost per unit will be equal to 195,000 minus, this time I will say 180,000. 180 because I have added the 15,000 to the 165,000 all over the lowest activity level of 22,000, the highest of 22,000 units minus the lowest of 17,000 units. All right, and so once we are able to get this, we can get our variable cost per unit, and our variable cost per unit will be 3 cedis per unit. And so that is how to come by the variable cost per unit. So now that we have our variable cost per unit, we are no more going to use the new figures that are inflated. We are still going back to the old figures. Now we are supposed to find the total fixed cost. Remember that is the next step. After finding a variable cost per unit, you find the fixed cost. But this is the challenge now. The fixed cost is not the same for the two. So what we have to do is that, unlike the raw method where there is no step up, where we can just put the variable cost per unit into any of the activity levels with an equation to find the fixed cost, over here fixed cost is not the same. So we are going to find two different fixed costs, one for the higher level and one for the lower level. And that means that we are going to construct two different total cost equations, one for the higher side above 19,000 and the other for the activity level that is below 19,000. So that is what we are going to do. Then I'll explain to you the reason why. And so now we have to find the fixed cost for the higher level and putting it into the total cost equation. Total cost equals to fixed cost plus variable cost. When we know that variable cost is quantity that times unit variable cost. Okay, and so putting that into the equation, at the higher level, the total cost is 195,000. We don't know the fixed cost. The quantity at that level is 22,000. Multiplying the variable cost per unit of 3 cedis. Okay, and that will give us that fixed cost will be equal to, sorry, there is a plus here rather. So what is our fixed cost? Doing a change of subject, fixed cost will now be equal to 129,000. So this is our fixed cost, 129,000 for the higher activity level. And then we'll find the same for the lower activity level. At the lower level, total cost is 165,000 and it's equal to the fixed cost plus quantity of 17,000 multiplying 3 cedis per unit. Okay, and so fixed cost will now be equal to 114,000. Now, having established the fixed cost for both the lower level and the higher level, let us do something. Let us compare. What is the difference between 129,000 and 114,000? The difference is 15,000. And that was what you were told in the question, that when output exceeds 19,000, fixed cost will step up by 15,000. And that is the 15,000 that is visible here. So it means that if you calculate your total fixed cost for the highest activity level range and the lowest activity level, the fixed cost should have a difference of the increase. That is the step up. All right. So having now achieved these two, what we have to do is to construct the total cost function for each of them. And so we cannot use the same total cost function for them because the fixed costs are not the same. And so to construct the total cost function for the highest activity level, we know that total fixed cost function is fixed cost plus quantity times the variable cost per unit. And so the total cost function will be, we have a fixed cost of 129,000. So 129,000 plus, we will not put any quantity there. That is what we will be using. And so the variable cost per unit is 3 cedis. And so it will be 129,000 plus 3 Q. And this will be the total cost function for the highest activity level. When we come to the lowest activity level, the total cost function will be total cost equal to a fixed cost of 114,000 plus 3Q. And so the only difference between these two equations is the fixed cost component. Now, that is not all. The most important part is what I'm going to tell you. That is the part for cost estimation. Now, having known this, your job is to use any of this to estimate cost. So you can be asked to find the total cost of producing any unit at all. Now, in this question, we are told to find the total cost of producing in 25,000 units and 14,000 units. Now, 25,000 units exceeds the 19,000 range. Remember that at any range above 19,000 has an increase in fixed cost of 15,000. So if you are finding total cost of 25,000, because it is above the relevant range, you are going to use this total cost function to find that. But with the 14,000 units, it is below 19,000. So we are going to use this total cost function. So what I'm trying to explain to you is that if you are asked to estimate any total cost for any unit at all, look at the units that it is in a question. Look at the range of the unit. Is it above the relevant range or below the relevant range? If the unit you are finding total cost for is above the relevant range, then you are going to use the total cost of the high activity level function. If you are finding a unit total cost for units that is below the 19,000, then you are going to use that. And so for the 25,000, I will say that total cost of producing 25,000 units will now be equal to this. Total cost will be, we will use this function 129,000 plus 3Q, and now the Q is 25,000 units. And so we'll do that to find the total cost. Right, and we have 204,000 Ghana cedis. So this will be the total cost of producing 25,000. In the same way, if we want to produce the 14,000, we cannot use this, we have to use this function instead. So it will be 114,000 plus 3 times 14,000. And then we can multiply to find our total cost. And that is going to give us 156,000. And so that is how it is done with a step up in fixed cost. If you don't have any question, we may look at another example later. And this is how to go by the high-low method when there is a step up in fixed cost. If you have any question, you can still put it down there in the comment section, and then we will discuss, or you can as well send it to me on WhatsApp so that we can get interactive. All right, so let us look at another question involving the step up in fixed cost. A company has identified that total fixed cost increased by 20% when activity level equals or exceeds 7,500 units. The variable cost per unit is constant over this range of activity. The company has identified the following costs at 3 activity levels. So we have high, 11,000 production units at a total cost of 276,000. And then we have a middle one, which is 8,000 units at 240,000 units. And then we have a lower one, which is 5,000 units at 180,000 cedis. Now, use the high-low method to segregate this cost and find the total cost equations. Okay, so this is what we are going to do. Now, looking at this question, we are given 3 activity levels. We are given 11,000 units at a cost of 276,000. We are given 8,000 units at a cost of 240,000. And then we are given 3,000 units. Is it 3,000? No, 5,000, sorry. 5,000 units at a cost of 180,000. Now, these are 3 activity levels, but the higher is 11,000 and the lower is 5,000. This is not any of them. This is the middle. Now, take note of something. We are told that the company has identified that total fixed cost increased by 20%. This time, we are not giving an absolute figure. We are giving it in percentage. It increases by 20% when activity level reaches or exceeds 7,500. 7,500 will be in between 5,000 and 8,000. It means that for these 2 activity levels, 8,000 and 11,000, fixed cost has already increased by 20%. And therefore, there is an increase. The fixed cost in the 5,000 activity level cost is different from the fixed cost in these 2. And so, these 2 have the same fixed cost, and then this one has not the same fixed cost. Now, what we are going to do now is that because we do not have an absolute figure, but it's a percentage, we can, and then we also have two activity levels falling on one side. We can ignore the lower level and assume this to be lower, the 8,000 units to be lower, and the 11,000 to be higher, for the purpose of calculating the variable cost per unit, because they have the same fixed cost. Remember that I told you that you cannot get the variable cost per unit if you do not have the same fixed cost component. And so what we are going to do now is that let us use the middle activity level and the higher activity level and assume the 8,000 to be a lower level for the purpose of getting the variable cost per unit. And after we have gotten the variable cost per unit, we will estimate the total cost function, or we find the fixed cost for this. And then we can apply the percentage and find the fixed cost for the 5,000 units as well. I'm sure this is not very difficult. And so let us quickly find our variable cost per unit. And so for the purpose of finding our fixed cost, it will be 276,000 minus 240,000, because I'm using the second one as the low level now because they have the same fixed cost component. And then I'll have 11,000 units minus 8,000 units down here, and that is going to give me 36,000 over 3,000 units, which eventually gives me 12 cedis per unit as my variable cost per unit. And so I have 12 cedis as the variable cost per unit. So now that I have 12 cedis as a variable cost per unit, I can proceed to find that total fixed cost, which is inside this, which is the same. Once it's the same, I can find the total fixed cost. And so I can use any of the activity levels. So assuming I'm using the 8,000 units, okay? So I'm going to have, so I can use any of these two to find the total fixed cost, putting it into the total cost equation because they have the same fixed cost. And so I'll have 240,000, which is total cost, equal to the fixed cost, which we don't know, plus a variable cost, which comprises quantity of 8,000 and a variable cost per unit of 12 cedis. And when we do, our fixed cost will be equal to 144,000. So this is the fixed cost, and it means that it is this fixed cost that has already been inflated by 20%. This one, because we are told that fixed cost will increase by 20% when output exceeds 7,500, and we have used what is above to find the fixed cost. So this 144,000 Ghana cedis fixed cost that we have here already includes an increase of 20%, and therefore we can now find that fixed cost, which is for the level that it does not exceed 7,500. I believe I am moving a little faster, and I believe that I'm making a lot of sense for you. Now, so let us now find the fixed cost for the 5,000 units. Okay, now having known this to be 144,000, we can just use our simple mathematics. It means that this fixed cost is 120% of the original fixed cost because it has been inflated by 20%. And so in order to find the fixed cost for the lower level, at that level, we can simply say 100 over 120 times 144,000. We are finding the fixed cost here, and so we are finding it originally when it has not been inflated. So that will be 100 over 120 times 144,000, and that is going to give us a fixed cost of 120,000. And so therefore, this is the original fixed cost. When you inflate this by 20%, you have 144,000. And so, ladies and gentlemen, this is now the fixed cost for the lower activity level. And so we can find, as we did for the first one, two different equations for total cost. We can find the equation of the total cost when activity exceeds 7,005 using this fixed cost, and then we can find the same equation when activity is below 7,005 using the fixed cost for the lower level. And so what we have to do is to find the total cost. Now the total cost at the higher range will be 144,000, which is the fixed cost after it exceeds, plus 12 K, because 12 is the variable cost per unit. We are told it is constant throughout. This is the first total cost equation for the activity level that exceeds 7,000. And for an activity level that is below 7,500 units, we have to use this lower fixed cost. And that is going to give us a total cost function of total cost equals to 120,000 plus 12Q. All right, so like I said, I'm moving a little faster because we have gone through this over and over again, and I'm sure by now your understanding has been completed. If you have any questions still on the high-low method with a step up in fixed cost, you can still comment down there, or you can send it to us on our WhatsApp platform, and we are going to interact with you. The next time we meet on the high-low method, we are going to look at high-low method with a change in variable cost per unit. And then finally, we'll look at the high-low method with inflation. And so these are methods that we are going to use to segregate costs. So I want you to continue following, subscribe to the channel, invite your friends to subscribe, let others also have a benefit, and we shall together be successful. Until we meet again next time, it is bye for now.